I am Michael T. Smith. This is The Church Up, and here's your message for the week of December 22 of 2024. There is a random good fortune that comes to us through life. We must at once acknowledge its randomness, admit that there's just stuff in our life that is good just because we lucked up into it. We must acknowledge and admit its randomness. This is coming into your notes. Did they come through to you? Okay. But we also must sense and appreciate its targetedness. And I know that's not a word, but if we will acknowledge and admit, look, things have just come into my life that are good. I can't explain. I had good teachers. I had a coach that believed in me. I had a favorite auntie that took me under their wing. I was blessed to go to college. I was the oldest. I was the youngest. I was, I had two parents together, or thank God my parents split apart, or I was adopted. I mean, we just look at the things that came to us and we say, okay, there was some random goodness that came in my life. And I acknowledge and admit that, but I also, can recognize and can appreciate, all right, this feels kind of targeted to me, like it makes my life feel special looking at the good things that have come to us. Why do we have to acknowledge that it feels targeted? Because that is actionable. If it's just, look, it's great to be me, it sucks to be you, or it's great to be you and it sucks to be me, there's nothing I have actionable or accountable with my life. But if I can look at my life and say, man, how have I been blessed? How has my life had good fortune or good luck? How did I just luck up into this, that I'm in a country that I'm in, or I speak the language that I speak, or I have the intelligence or the physical size or health, all the ways that our lives are blessed. If we say, well, it's kind of random in the sense that I don't really can explain why me versus someone else, but it also feels personal so that I can act out of that goodness, so that I can be accountable in that goodness. Because this cosmic favor, this life favor in your notes is not something we can earn, but it is something, but we certainly can pray for it. Say, well, you can't earn luck, but that's true. You can't earn good fortune, but maybe you can pray for it. And people say, well, that's irrational, or that's impractical, or that's unrealistic to pray for it. I agree, but at minimum, it's something that we can feel grateful for. Say, well, if you don't believe you can pray, Lord, I just thank you that the universe and that life and that good things come to me today, and that I walk in good fortune. You say, well, that's ridiculous. You can't pray for that. Maybe you can't pray for that, or maybe you can pray for it, maybe it doesn't do anything. But when you have that good fortune, it's almost a compulsion that we must be grateful for it, feel grateful for it, and carry ourselves grateful for it. And because of this, because of my belief that the good luck, the good fortune that comes into our lives is at once random but feels personal. At once we have nothing to do with it, but we also should be accountable for it. At once we can pray for it and desire it, but maybe that doesn't do anything. But even if that doesn't do anything, we can't help but feel grateful for it in the spirit of all of that. And this doesn't have to be in your notes, but I am well aware that I could be wrong or I could be right in this. But because I believe good fortune can be prayed for, I say, may the road rise with you, right? May life be good. May the sun smile upon you. May your life be heaven blessed and heaven kissed. This is why we close every service here at the Church of with a prayer of blessing. Why? Because I firmly believe in good fortune coming to us, goodness coming to us from God. And even though it kind of seems to come in random ways, or even though it seems to come with no traceable cause or origin, we receive it and acknowledge, look, it just kind of befell me. The dominoes tilted this way. We receive it that way, but we act and live out of gratitude for it, because that to me is the ideal, true religious Christ response. Now, all other favor, shifting gears, that will come to us, every other form of goodness besides this cosmic random goodness, in your notes here, all other favor and good fortune that will come to and through our lives will now come through the willful actions of humans. So there's a random fortune that comes to it just through life or through the universe, the cosmos, but then there's a human good fortune that comes into our lives, that comes through our lives, that comes not from the random cosmos and life. It comes by humans willfully releasing it to us. And that's a powerful idea, that there is good that can come to us randomly, but there is good that can come to us from God through people that doesn't happen by chance or happen by luck or happen by some curious, curated series of circumstances, but there is a fortune that comes to us because a human being wills that goodness of God to come to us, that human expression. Consider in your notes, all those billions in the world today, oh, hear this, all the billions in the world today, praying and yearning, bargaining, negotiating with God, with the universe, with life, just give me a break. Or they say to the sun, please today. I mean, consider all those billions in the world today, praying, yearning, near and far, in places that are heavily in traumatic geopolitical weather crises or whatever it is. They are today praying, yearning, bargaining, negotiating with God in hope that some tangible kindness might come their way, or in non-traumatized circumstances, people that need insurance things to go through, or people that need a job application to come back, or people that need just a thing to go well here or there, that all the billions praying in hope that some tangible kindness might come their way, some needed on-time manifestation of life-saving or life-relieving or life-enlarging act of goodwill, that there are people out there saying, I need this to come through for me. Consider those billions today. Asking, seeking, praying, negotiating, yearning for this kindness. And it's a kindness that when it comes to them, they will thank God for. They'll thank God for the promotion. They'll thank God for the food that arrives. They'll thank God for the medicine. They'll thank God for the kind stranger that shows up. They'll thank God for it, but and rightly so, they should thank God for it, even though they'll thank God for it, even though it didn't make a single inch of progress toward them until some human being willed to bring it to them. What I'm saying is this, that we have the random good fortune in life, but the rest of the good fortune, any good fortune that will come forth into the world, to the billions praying for it, yearning for it, bargaining for it, negotiating for it, counting on some on time. I need a manifestation that will save my life. I need a manifestation that will relieve this stress in my life. I need a manifestation that will enlarge my life, some act of goodwill to come to me. And when it comes to me, these billions say, oh, thank God for it, even though they're thanking God for it, yet that goodness didn't make 1 inch of progress toward them until a human willed it that way. Now we're talking about the human side of favor. I think of the Corinthians and the Philippian church, and I think of the discussion of the collection they were taking up for the poor and oppressed peoples who were starving and who were basically cut off and isolated because of religious persecution. He says, hey, we're going to take up some offering. We're going to help these people for their clothing, for their dignity. They've been locked away. They've been abused. They've been oppressed. All the Christ followers at Jerusalem. And he says, and when you do this great act, it says it will cause thanksgiving to abound to God. Think of that. They would receive the deliverance. They would receive the food. They would receive the clothing. They would receive the medicine. They would receive the support. Who did it come from? Those humans who acted with human favor and a will for goodwill. That's where it came from. But remember, when those notes of goodness and kindness came to him, they came to him like cash in the United States. We get a dollar bill. It says, this has been issued by the Treasury. Well, I didn't get it from the Treasury. I got it from the Stop and Go. Well, who its last hand that it was in is how it got to us. But before that goodness was in those hands, that goodness was out there in that random form of kindness that exists in the cosmos. I hope you're hearing me today. So there is goodness that has befallen you, befallen me, despite our trials, despite our seasons. We can look around and find out, well, I am still advantaged in this world, even though, man, things are really bad. And to live out of that sense of advantage, to live out of that sense of good fortune, to seed ourselves there. And there are other people in need of good fortune. Out of our good fortune, there are other human beings around the world praying, seeking God, that goodness would come, and goodness will come, and it does come. But when it comes, the last hands that touch it is human hands. The hands that willed it, the mind that willed those hands in that direction were human mind, but it's human minds, human hands acting as extensions and expressions of the divine mind. I hope you're catching what I'm saying. It's this old thing when somebody calls you up and says, hey man, I just had you on my mind. I learned from my pastor a long time ago. Well, I take that to mean that God had me on God's mind. Why? Because if you're reaching out with encouragement and showing me this goodness through a human being, I have to accept that, wow, I see that coming from Tom, but what came from Tom originally came as a goodness from God. So I acknowledge God. I acknowledge God for the random. I acknowledge God for the human. I always acknowledge God behind it, but I I feel fortunate for what has come to me and grateful for those who were of willing mind and hand to bring it into my life. So think of this in your notes. If there exists any favor that is certain in this world, any favor that is certain to reach its target, any tangible kindness that is certain to bring good into the life of another human being, that favor that we look for is not the cosmic random favor that seems to befall us by chance. But if there exists any favor that is certain in this world, it is that favor that comes from us. If there is any favor that is certain in this world, it is that favor that comes from us. That the yearning billions, the near and far, right? The negotiating, the praying, the pleading billions near and far. First world, second world, third world, that are saying, I need something, somehow a tangible kindness, a forgiveness, an access, an entrance, some information, some insight, some petition, some material thing. I am in need of it, and they are asking God for it. It will pass through human hands who are mindful to deploy and to release that kindness in the world. And even though I will be so grateful to the people, I will ultimately be grateful to God for that God kindness that has come to me in human form. A precious member, wrote an email in a couple of weeks ago and says, well, Pastor Mike, I hear you saying that we should go through life and see the suffering and respond to it, but why should we do that when God doesn't? I mean, God sees the suffering and doesn't seem to respond. And you're telling us that we should respond. If God doesn't seem to care, why should we care? And that's an interesting thing. So many levels to unpack on that. And it may feel, I get that. It may be argued that the universe, the whole space and everything, life seems indifferent. To the plight of the shared human suffering, that the world doesn't seem to care about what's going on with human beings. The universe doesn't seem to care about what's going on with human beings. So why should we care? It's indifferent. I'm going to be indifferent too. And the suffering that we're indifferent towards is a shared suffering. We all have things where we are hurting and where we experience loss. Although it's a disparate suffering, some are definitely carrying more of that. We're lifting up the pool table, but some people are carrying much more of the suffering weight than others. So it may be argued the universe doesn't care, why should I? If God doesn't care, why should I? But it cannot be refuted at the same time. You cannot argue. You cannot say, well, there's no compassion in the world. For certainly there is compassion within this universe, because that compassion lies in me and in you. And you and I, who have a mind to see the cosmic favor that has befallen us. You and I, who have a mind to seat ourselves in a sense of good fortune, even though if we had enough time, we could rattle off all the things going wrong in our lives. You and I, who seat ourselves in the good fortune and greet the world with a sense of good fortune forward, we are the vessels and carriers of compassion in the entire universe. So you say, well, the universe seems indifferent. Not entirely. There's compassion here, and that compassion is bottled up in the hearts of human beings. And so it will not be that God does not act compassionately in the world. It will be that we don't act as agents of God compassionately in the world. For we are in full possession of the human distribution of favor. There's cosmic favor that we can't trace and can't explain, but there is human kindness that is here, and you and I are in sole possession. If you think a 52 deck of cards, God has dealt those cards of tangible goodness out into the world across the 7.5 billion people that live in the world. We are all in possession of certain. Some of us have low cards, some of us have aces, some of us have kings, some of us have threes, but we are all in possession of something. And if there will be any shifting and movement in the economy of favor and goodness traded amongst men, amongst mankind, amongst humankind, it will be by us who are sensitive to and willing to flow in that favor. We'll get to that. Accepting this truth, living in this, is the heart of Christ-centered Christianity. What do you mean Christ-centered Christianity? There is church-centered Christianity, which is the institution that seeks its own welfare, the weaponized idea of tribalized co-option of Christ. That is church-centered, institution-centered Christianity. But what I'm talking about, living and seeing in this sense and this accountability, that if there's any goodness is going to be released in this world, it's going to be released through me. And looking at our lives and saying, well, man, I feel favor impotent in so many areas, but I can't be in paralysis of the analysis of my favor impotence. There's so much I would do that I can't. Well, there's no movement of goodness in that attitude. But when you seat yourselves in your sense of good fortune, say, wow, I do have something of good to bring into this world. Now, all of a sudden, we are walking in the heart of Christ-centered Christianity. If there is to be any movement of any tangible, incarnate compassion, if there is compassion of God that is kind of out in the ethereal realm, if that is going to become tangible, if that is going to become tangibilized, if that is going to become incarnated, right? That goodness and compassion, if there is any movement of that tangible, incarnate compassion in the world, it will surely come through the willful action of those who are in possession of it. And that's you, and that's me. All people on some dimension are in possession of the tangible, maybe not material, but tangible goodness of God. And if that is going to lock down and be stagnant, it will be because we are not willing to let it flow. But if that tangible goodness of God that is shared and distributed amongst all humans on the earth, if there's going to be movement, it will come because of the willful action of you and I who are in possession of it. We are not all equally in possession of the same capacity, but we are all in possession of some capacity to move that tangible goodness. I don't know if you're out there. I don't know if you're getting anything. Are people even on? Okay, there's a couple people. Okay, so this is, here we go. So I want to move now in the next, 20 minutes or so that we have here, and talk about the idea of material generosity. This is something as a church that's come up, and we're a church 34 weeks old now, and people say, I have questions about, in the light of the Omega view, which we talked about a couple weeks ago, what do you mean by the Omega view? That which all humans will finally come to understand about God, when at last we come to understand the truth of God, which when we come into that last understanding, it's really going to be the first time we ever really understood anything about God. And I imagine that's going to be a very large, loving, compassionate, non-weaponized, non-tribalized idea. And we who live by the Omega view try to live with the Omicron, right? There's the Omega, the big O, right, in the Greek alphabet. Then there's the Omicron, the little o. We have the little Omicron right now, and we try to see how big God is, but we try to live with our little Omicron, the little o view, as though we'll finally see, oh my God, God is bigger and gooder than we ever imagined. We try to live in that bigger gooderness right now. So what about in the light of the Omega view? What about in the light of the church of? What do we believe about material generosity? What do we believe? And a common question we get is about tithing. I grew up, but I spent about 30 some years in kind of conditionalized transactional religion. This idea that if you don't sign up for the Christ team and make certain confessions and have a certain faith, you're outside of God and you will be for eternity. And in that came a doctrine of tithing. And that doctrine of tithing, and I would describe myself as a radical tither for a long number of years, basically says that 10% of everything that comes into your hand, whether you find $10 on the ground or you get a paycheck of, $10,000 a week, that before Uncle Sam gets a cut, before anybody else gets a cut, God gets the 10%, and that is kind of the baseline, that you start with 10% as a tithe, and then on that you would add offerings to the work of the church, and then you would add missions money to go out and tell people, they're going to hell if they don't sign up and become at least a distributor, maybe not an executive distributor, but a distributor of the gospel plan. And then we would have, building fund pledges and ushers board offerings and on and on and on. And I don't really shame any of that. I from the time I was 15, 16 years old, was a radical tither and giver. But as I think of it in light of TCO, I'm amazed at two things. Number one, how far my thinking has come. But beyond that, I'm amazed at how complex the process of renewing my mind is. It's almost a denewing of my mind regarding my old financial thinking, and then a fresh grooving, because all of my tithing was out of this sense of pious compulsion, that when I gave my tithe, it was never a lateral act. That tithing for me, like so many of you, was not me giving something material into something earthly material into something earthly material. My act of tithing was out of a pious compulsion that if I'm going to be vertically aligned in this world, I must give this material thing to a material place, but I'm really doing it as a transaction for vertical alignment with God. Because what were we taught? We were taught that if we did not secure that vertical alignment with God by this material thing being given to a material entity, first of all, that by doing that, it was the key to unlocking the blessing over our life, that if we wanted to be blessed, we weren't really giving a tithe to a church. We were presenting an unlocking, offering with God. Or even if we felt blessed, if we wanted to have a continuance of blessing, right? Because so maybe the door, the heavens open your life, right? Maybe the cosmos, the universe is open over your life, and you're getting rain in your life. That's because you've unlocked that with tithing. And if you want that rain to continue, you must show up, not necessarily every week, not necessarily every month, but you must certainly show up at every time something new comes into your hand to tap that open button to keep that continuance and that unlocked blessing over your life. And even that, right, was not just the total truth of tithing in my old thinking, but the other part of it wasn't that I had something materially good to do material good with. It was I have something material good that I'm going to unlock blessing or sustain or secure or continue blessing. But also tithing for me, I was taught, was at minimum an insulation against curses. It was an insurance against curses. That if I wanted to keep the curse or curses or cursing off my life, that this act of taking this material good, that it really didn't even matter where it went. Now, it was supposed to go to the church because the church is the arbiter, I don't want to use big words. The church is in charge of the message. They are the central control of the message of going to heaven and hell. They're the central stewards of it. And supporting the church was supporting the mission of getting souls out of hell. And so therefore, my material, the highest and best use of my 10% would be to go to the institution that was doing the highest and best thing in the world, which was getting people out of hell. But that's not really where tithing was. I took my 10%. And when I was working and for $375, $525 an hour, finding and getting a $122 check, I just didn't give $12.20. I rounded that thing up to $13. Why? Because it really wasn't about the $13 I was bringing to my church, although the institution of the church used it for the church uses of building these institutions to get more souls out of hell. That's what it was used for. But really what I was doing was, by taking that $12.20 plus the 80 cents offering, rounding up what I was really doing was securing the open heaven over my life and insulating myself from problems, because it wasn't earthly material to earthly material use to earthly material use. It was earthly material use through a vertical checkbox down to earthly material use, because if I didn't do the checkbox thing, then I hadn't done it right. And this is where my shift has come, because as I came into the Omega view, as I came into nothing else matters, and into TCO, I still feel this compulsion for tithing, and the giving of the 10% is not where my challenge has been. It's defragging my brain that somehow my failure to do this is going to cause problems for me. or that somehow my completion of this is going to create things for me. I now see the idea of tenthing for what it is. It's material goods set aside to do material good. It is an earthly thing to do earthly things instead of an earthly thing that qualifies me for something heavenly on its way to do something earthly. And that is a part of that deep grooving of that weaponized religion in my soul and the complex road it is to get it out. So I'm now resolved, or I will say I'm resolving to live charitably. And to consider the 10th, right? To consider the wisdom of it in many religious traditions, many secular traditions, people who are they start with that. There's something about that 10th. I'm resolving to live charitably and to consider the wisdom of that 10%. But I'm also in this place of saying, okay, well, let me set aside 10% to do good into the world, not to always feel like if I don't do this, I'm going to be in trouble, or by doing it, I'm going to be assured. That's the false religion I'm trying to get out of. But also that I don't have to feel compelled to do it to an institution that is pushing a fundamental message that I no longer believe in, because I no longer believe the highest and best use of religious energy is to get people to sign up for the team so they don't go to hell. I now believe the highest and best use is as an act of bringing some of the goodness of the not yet world into the right now world. But it's a continual effort that I got to make to not feel vulnerable for not doing the traditional thing with the tithe, especially when life isn't going so great. This is what we're going to talk about with forgiveness. But when life isn't going so great, the first thing we're taught to do is, God, where am I not in compliance, which is causing my life not to be good? And tithing is one of those things where it's like, when I do it, I try not to feel like, oh, Connie, we were able to give a 10th over to this. Okay, God, does that qualify us for a great new prosperity dimension in our life? I'm trying to break out of that. But also when I say, oh, Connie, we had to choose between paying a bill this week or giving that $12.20, rounding it up to $13. Okay, well, let's do that and let's hold off on, and maybe if we get something at the end of the month, we'll be able to add that 13 in, or maybe we'll just do that, or we brought in 2,000 this month. We normally give 200, but we were only able to give 100 to the homeless shelter. And now what's my other battle? Oh my God, I'm walking through life without my covering. I'm out here with no net on a tightrope because I didn't do the vertical tithing thing. God, please don't let me fall. I'll put the safety nets back up. I'll get back in compliance. Where does this come from? It's that ongoing weaponized religious compulsion, which still resides in our soul. And it's also weird to not feel. And I don't know. I don't even know if you're catching. Am I just rambling, or is anybody? Okay. I feel like I'm talking. Mikey, are you getting anything? Okay. Because I feel like I'm just. And it's also a challenge to me to not feel like the highest and best use of it is the furthering of the gospel, right? The whole thing. We sent 50 missionaries over to XYZ poor country so that they could feed, educate, and perform surgeries on people's mouths or on people's eyes or whatever it is. They say, great, how many souls did you win in the village? Well, we really didn't talk to them about Jesus or souls. We just went over there to help them out and give them food. You totally wasted your whole trip. What good is it fixing eyes if those eyes are just going to see flames in eternity, right? These eyes have never seen another flames like these, right? I mean, if that's all you did, you just wasted everybody's money. We gave money for missions, and missions is not food. Missions is not housing. Missions is not surgery. Missions is souls. And so it's hard to feel like, wow, you're giving, but you're not giving to saving souls. So am I wasting this gift? And again, all of this is the hangover of this weaponized religion. Now, I will say, I do believe in the imperative of the Christ message. I do believe Christ, that's why I'm here. I do believe that the world would be better off if they had a religion and a revelation of the person of Christ. I believe the church would be better off if they got out of weaponized religion and got into a religion based on the person of Christ. If they got out of this who's going to heaven and who's going to hell and how can we stop it, if they got out of that demonic deception and got into real, true religion, which we've talked about over this, I don't have time to go back for it, I think the world would be better off with a true Christ message, not the standard contra Christ tear expression of weaponized religion, but true religion. So I preach that, and I believe in that, and that is something I'm willing to support. But I'm not willing to support the us-them version of religion anymore. And I do think the message of Christ that I'm trying to get out to the world, I think it should go leaven-y. Maybe not viral, maybe not bacterial, but I do think that what I'm trying to put an argument for into the Christ consciousness of so many of you, of so many of your friends and family, they say, you really should listen to this. You really should listen to this. This guy's saying out loud things that I've known in my heart, but nobody has ever said out loud before. I believe in that so much that I'm willing to pay a price to get it out into the world. So I do believe the message of Christ should be supported, but I don't believe it should be supported in the sense of telling everybody they're on the wrong team and putting out these awful demonic ideas of hell and torment and punitive punishment and wars and all this other kind of stuff. And I know so many people that can't just walk in the love of Christ, walk in the light of Christ, because they're still hanging on to when's the rapture coming and when's the blood up to the horse's bridle and when he's going to get the mark of the beast and when is this and when is he going to separate and burn everybody up? I mean, it's all this. It's still all this violence in their religion, and the violence is obscuring the vision of Christ. So I do believe in getting the message of true religion out in the world, but I no longer believe that message is get on the right team before time runs out, and this brings conflict in me. And I do believe there are churches that are doing good. I do believe sometimes giving to a church is a way to get that tangible goodness into people's lives, and that there are feeding programs, there are all these things. I believe in that. But I also know that for most churches, that is an aside. That idea of helping out people is really not the principal business. Of easing suffering, it's really not the principal business. As a matter of fact, any help that they give and any easing of suffering that we typically do in church is done so that we can get the gospel to them so they don't go to hell. It's a means to an end instead of an end in of itself. So obviously I believe in supporting those who are bringing the larger truth of God through a Christ lens or through other lens that brings out true religion. Obviously, I believe in supporting it because that's what I'm doing here. And I believe that support for that message, that non-weaponized religious message, should come first among the receivers of it, which is why every time we teach here, once a week, once a month, something, we say, hey, if this thing is being a blessing to you, thank you for your support. I believe that, and I believe that support is different levels from different people, different person, situation, circumstances, and season. But I also think it's honorable, right, for people who are receiving of something that is sustaining their souls and their lives, that is changing them from the inside out. I do think it's honorable to support it. And so Connie and I, out of our resources, we engage in that support. And we try to say, okay, God, there was a time when we had, when our tenth could be $10,000, at a year. So what are we going to do with $10,000? Now our tenth might be, $1,000. What are we going to do with it? How do we figure out how to say, well, let's put off a little bit here to support these, this man over here, this woman over here, bringing this message of true religion. How do we do that? And then how do we put this other towards easing suffering? And if we've done it, if we've done the tenth or not the tenth, or did we do enough, or did we do too much, or should it have gone to God? Should it have gone to all the stress of that? And all I'm trying to do is live generously, but this hangover and this shadow of it's not just 30 years, it's all of my developmental and primary productive adult years have been spent in this. I also think, as we talk about how do we use our materials, I think sometimes people are assigned by God to people, assigned by God to certain works that God has specifically put on certain people's heart an assignment. You got a young person going to school, and the Lord lays on your heart, you're going to be the benefactor to take care of that. Or you got somebody who's, I'm going to go and start performing, teaching, reading overseas, and the Lord just lays on your heart. Yep, and you're going to make sure that they have everything that they need to take care of that. Well, they're giving up their this and they're giving up that. Yep. And they're going over there and God lays on your heart and you're going to send X dollars a month to make sure that happens. There are times when we are given assignments as benefactors. There's our general charitable life, which we do at all times. There's the question of, is there a reason of setting aside 10%, which I think there is some wisdom in that. But then there's an additional thing of God just puts assignments on our heart and says, this one right here, I'm telling you to get involved in it. And we must be sensitive to that with our material supply. Consider the women who supported Jesus. These powerful women, it lists them by name, not always common in Scripture. It lists them by their status in this society, whose wife they were, or the great women. He uses the phrase great women, these influential women in this Second Temple Israel society. It says, who took care of him out of their substance. What? They were just assigned to take care of this guy who was causing all these problems in Nazareth. And they did. And I believe in that. I believe there are times that God will put on your heart to do that. I believe in radically absurd support. I believe that there are those whose hearts are prompted, and I'm just telling you out of my own life, to gesture extravagantly toward mystics and shamans and teachers and seers. I think in the scripture of the widow woman who saw the Hebrew scriptures, he saw the guy walking by and he says, who is that? And he says, oh, that's a prophet. And he says, well, I'm going to build him a little guest house so he can sleep overnight on his way to the city. That extravagant gesture. I believe in that. And sometimes there are things, and I've seen this in my own life, where you're not even receiving directly from that person. It's not like, well, so-and-so's on this thing, and I read their book, and, it blessed me, and I just wanted to send them a thing. There is that thing. But there's also a thing where you just hear of somebody doing something to say, hey, I'm really not a person who needs that medical care. I'm really not a person who needs that, the cooking and all the meals you bring. But the Lord just laid on my heart to bless you. I'm not receiving from what you're doing, but God just, and I heard you needed new ovens, and I went out and bought you new ovens for your whole thing. So just tell me what kind you need and get the contractor and just tell him to send me the bill. Well, that'll be like $50,000. Well, I'm prepared to write the $50,000. Where did this come from? Not because I needed the food and I'm so grateful, hey, I want to give something back for what you've done for me, but just God lays these extravagant gestures on people's heart, even from people who aren't necessarily exchanging in the you're feeding me or sustaining me or ministering to me, etc. Are you listening to what I'm saying? I remember my mom and dad. When I was growing up, there was a young preacher. He was HIV positive back in the days when that was touch and go. People just, you didn't know, and this guy was preaching, and he had been out and he'd been a drug user and he'd been all these things or whatever was going on, I don't know, but kind of a rough testimony. And this guy had a fiery personality, and he was firing, preaching, and he had been delivered, and now he was going to deliver everybody else, and he's battling this thing. And this is back when you didn't, back in the early 90s when should you shake hands, should you have them over, you give them a glass at your table, they drink out of your glasses, and we laugh at that, and that's, oh, that's so ridiculous. Hey, it wasn't ridiculous at the time. No one really understood in the late 80s and 90s what this thing was. But I remember at that time, my mother coming home and said, we're going to support that boy. I said, what are you talking about? I didn't even know he was somebody. We're going to support that boy, and we're going to give him a place to live, and we're going to give him a place to stay, and I'm going to build him a room here. And they had a little front room, and they put up a blanket, and they gave him a bed, and they gave him this, and he ate at our table. And I mean, my parents didn't have anything. They had no money at all. My dad's watching this. He'll remember this. Don't type in the comments, Dad. Don't give out details of who's what. But, Dad, you will remember this. And set him up a little home. And in our thing. And I remember, I'm just a teenage guy, 17, 18 years old. I'm trying to be spiritual, but this guy's at our table, and, he's like, he's holding the fork and the spoon. He's like, you want some more potatoes? I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good. Why? Because I'm all germaphobe. I don't know. Did he just put AIDS on those? What did you just do here, man? We were stupid back then. We didn't know anything about it. And I remember my parents said, I don't care who it is. We're going to support this young man. And they did. And they encouraged him. And they drove him here. And they picked him up. And they dropped him off. And when my mom was famous for this, if she had $20, she's putting it in your pocket and telling you, just take it, just take it, just take it. She got that from my grandma. And that's what they did, because sometimes God just lays on our heart to extravagantly support. Think about Jesus, right? What do we know from the stories of his ministry? That he was going to keep the Passover, and he's out of town, and people don't want him in their hotels. And how are we going to do it? And he says, well, go into the village. There's a guy there, and say to him, hey, follow that guy. And they followed the guy, and they walked up to this room. They had prepared a Last Supper. Well, it wasn't Last Supper. They had prepared a Passover table for 28 people. This guy set up for 28 guests. This huge table, 13 on one side, 13 on the other side, 2 at the heads of the table. But Jesus only had 13, so they all sat on one side, and they left the other sides of the table blank. You've seen the photo. So, but this guy said, oh, it's up here. I've prepared. What? I've done something extravagant. I prepared this. I didn't even know why I was setting it up for 28, but I did. And you guys can definitely do your thing here, do your photo op here. You can do all that kind of stuff. And you do it right here. You do it at the table in the back with the stuff that's not even on the menu. Come in here and you can do it, that extravagant thing. When Jesus died, where are they going to lay him? What are they going to do? Everybody's taking off running. Judas has went off with the money. He's selling souls. He's doing this. Everybody, and what is it? A very wealthy man, Joseph of Arimathea, says, well, I've got a place you can put him down. Oh, you can't do that. Well, they might come to you. They can do whatever they want to me, honey. I buy and sell politicians in this town like people that buy and sell stuff fast. I'm tired. I buy and sell. Listen, put them in I've got a family plot over here. You can lay them here. What an extravagant gesture. That's what it means to live through life charitably. That sometimes we live through life, we say, okay, I'm just going to try to make it a habit of setting aside a tenth so that I don't consume everything I have with my need or my greed, and I'm going to do that, and I'm trying not to make sure that I'm doing it to feel blessed or not cursed, because I don't want to live in that type of false religion, but I try to do good with it, and then out of that is support also. Okay, well, so what about, when I'm getting something from something that's changing my life, I want to support, but then also out of that is assignment. God has laid this on my life, but then also out of that is this extravagant gestures, and this is how it works. I'm thinking about me with my own mother. She died six years ago, just this past week. And, I was without money, without a church home, without anything. I used to have a church and a chapel and a multiple little sanctuaries. If you had a big thing, we could bury you in the main sanctuary. If you had a little thing, we could bury you in a little room. If you had just a couple of people coming in, just want to do them all right, we had 15 different places. But I found myself with no money, no place. I mean, scraping just to get her cremated. Just trying to figure out how can you take $200 on this credit card, $100 on this credit card, $75 on this credit card. I mean, it was just the worst time to die. You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. I can hear my mother now. See that I'm dead and you're still giving me grief. But I remember speaking to my spiritual father, and he said, and my spiritual mother, and he said, look, he said, man, we're sorry to hear about your mom. And I said, he said, just we're praying for you. And I didn't know how to say it. I said, I have no place to bury my dead. I have no place to lay them to rest. And if there's any way, I could. And he said, well, what are you talking about? He said, this is your home forever. He said, you have no church, you have no flock, you have no congregation, you have no money to even get a meeting room, but this is your home. You can bury your dead right here. And we did. And they opened up the place and they let us have the thing. And it was just, tremendous. This kind of ridiculous, over the top, extravagant generosity. You want to live like that. It's interesting. Jesus received material support, but he didn't institutionalize it. I think that's great. He received material support, but he didn't say, ooh, I'm going to build a local place. I'm going to build this, and nothing wrong with that. But Jesus received material support, and he was using it for the sustaining, Remember it says the disciples went off into the village to buy food. That's how they fed each other. Jesus had his individual benefactors that were like, we got him. You don't need to worry. Jesus, you don't need to worry about a salary. You don't need to be worried about taking anything out. We will make sure you have everything you need. What a powerful thing to live like that. But then he has all this money that people give for, and he's got these 12 disciples. And he got this. Okay, go over here to buy food. But at the Last Supper, what happens? He whispers to Judas, and he's like, Aji Korajis, right? Do what you're going to do, man. Let's get it on. Let's make it happen. And Judas darts out of the room, and what did everybody say? Oh, he must have just whispered to Judas to give something to the poor out of the bag, because that's what they knew him. He didn't take the money and institutionalize it, that he was coming out of support. He took the money, took care of the needs of his disciples and everything else, and then used the other of it, to ease suffering. I mean, he's showing us a pattern of life. Paul received sparing support, as we know, very little support from all the people that he ministered to. They would throw him out of his own church, right? Or he would say, hey, maybe you guys could throw a couple bucks in next time you come through so we could, have some food or whatever. And they're like, oh, why are we going to give money to you? And he's like, good Lord. Not the Philippian church. The Philippian church is like, man, we got you. We got you. If nothing else, we got you. Sorry it took so long to get to us, man. We got here, we got there. But when it finally showed up, Paul was like, I cannot believe you guys have been planning this the whole time. This extravagant support. But what did Paul do? He didn't institutionalize the money he was raising. He said, look, we're going to come and take up an offering. An offering for what? The institution to enlarge the tribalized idea? No, we're going to take up an offering because there's poor people over here and we're going to alleviate their suffering. They were trying to tell us something before the religio-political powers took over. This is the summary of Christ's salvific doctrine. If you want to get saved, if you want to believe Jesus Christ is the way to get saved, listen to what he's saying. Listen to a story about the rich man and Lazarus. And the rich man goes to hell, and God says to him, you drove right by somebody that needed that would have been happy. He didn't want your steak. He just wanted the little gristly parts that you weren't going to eat. He didn't want your potato. He just wanted the little husk because you don't like the taste of it. He didn't want your asparagus. He just wanted the little asparagus stems because you only eat the tops. He didn't want the cake that you had. He just wanted the little icing part that you think is so sweet, and you drove right by him. And what does the rich man say? Oh my God, go back and tell everybody I was this faithful religious person and I missed the complete point. Hear Christ's words. Or Zacchaeus, the rich man, who says, I've got so much, half my stuff I'm giving to the poor, and if I rip people off, I'm going to pay that back too. And Jesus says, salvation came to you today. Why? Because you confessed the death, burial, and resurrection, believed your heart, God raised him from the dead, got cleansed, got washed, got renewed in your spirit, made Jesus Lord of your life, going to live for him for the rest of your life. That's not what happened at all. He released his material good towards the suffering, and Jesus said, salvation has come to your house. Consider the story of the sheep and the goats, right? The sheep and the goats. He says, God says he's going to stand on the throne of judgment, divide all human beings in two categories. These are the people that saw the suffering and responded. They're going to the good place. You are the people that walked by the suffering and didn't even care. You're going to the bad place. If you want to hear the message of salvation in Christ, hear that message, that there's a material aspect to just recognizing how you're favored, finding the little ways, not that you're favor impotent, but where you're favor empowered, and going through life and saying, I'm going to use that favor, that goodness in some capacity to support, because sometimes you'll give me an assignment, sometimes there's a chance to do extravagant good, but I'll go through life living that way. And this leads us to this life of largeness of heart. This springs from a life of largeness of heart. I hope you're out there. I hope you're listening to what I'm saying. I hope you're listening to this preacher. Maybe I'd feel better if I tell you, I guess you can't touch 10 people and tell them, like 10 people's comments and tell them God's going to turn your life around, whatever it is. Let's just bring this in for a landing. Let's bring it in for a landing. Come on, we got a couple minutes here. I'll go quick. Listen. There are a few people in this world with very generous hearts, radically generous hearts. They don't have radical resource capacity. They got the heart for radical generosity, just not that radical resource capacity. There are people in this world who have radical resource capacity. They just don't have the radically generous heart. Precious and few are those with a radically generous heart and that radical material capacity. I think we want to be those people, right? We already have the generous hearts. I think that there are many of us who go through life daydreaming, right? And maybe we should temper our visions of grand living and temper those a little with enlarged visions of grand giving. But I think there are people who go through life just planning out of their generosity of heart. Oh, if I ever get the radical resource capacity, what I would do over here. And you know what's interesting? Very few of those dreamers ever get the radical resource capacity that they dream of, But with the little resource capacity they have, they do radically generous things with it. That's who we want to be. Who are you thinking of? Who's on your mind? Oh, my niece has been through such a thing. Boy, if I tell you what, if I get this bonus at the end of the year, I think I'm just going to get her a new car. Well, there it is now. You're already planning for resource capacity, right? But you're planning it with a radical generosity. This to me is the Spirit of Christ. Now, people say, well, I have no problem being generous. I don't dream of living better. Well, I think if you've never lived in a season of, or a long season under the millstone of grinding resource insecurity, that you never think about, well, if I win the lottery, I'd just give it all away. Why? Well, I basically look around and my life's pretty good. But I think there are a lot of people that have come out of extended seasons of resource insecurity, and their dreams of a better life exist right alongside their dreams of, generosity. Resource insecurity is experienced by people across socioeconomic levels. And I think maybe there's the rare case of person that says, I've lived an entire lifetime without needing a provision miracle. Well, I am not that person. I'm sure you are not that person. There may be people that say, I've lived a whole life and never once needed God to come through for me to provide something miraculous. I've never once needed to even pray for that. Well, it's great to be you. The rest of us know what it's like to live that if God doesn't come through somehow, some way, if there's not some sort of provision miracle, we're in trouble. And we have lived that and seen those miracles. I think there's probably a smaller number of people who say, I've never seen a provision miracle. I believe you have. Maybe you didn't notice it. But I believe if we sat down long enough, you would see where something came through. And then I think there are those who have gone down with the ship, waiting on a miracle that never came. And probably they weren't waiting on a miracle that never came, so much as they were waiting on a person with favor to act towards them that never acted. Well, Pastor Mike, what do you mean by resource insecurity? Well, it comes in many forms. Resource insecurity, what do I mean by that? That there's no actionable path that I can take towards resource assurance. Like I need X, and I'm looking around for a way to do something to generate X, and I am not assured that those resources will manifest by this action. Sometimes we're between actions, like I was doing this action at this job and I'm waiting for this job to come in, or I'm trying to find the next action, and in between that, I don't have an assured way to get resources. That's resource insecurity. Sometimes people say, I'm doing the actions, I'm working, but unfortunately the actions are not producing enough for me to have assurance that I'm going to be taken care of. That's a scary place too. Other people, and boy, I felt like this. Some of you have felt like this. Oh, no. I'm doing the actions and I'm getting the resources, but my action resource connection thing is kind of real sketchy. It's kind of real skittish, because like I can do actions that bring resources, and then all of a sudden the resources, and I'm still doing the actions, but I change the actions. Or sometimes I'm doing resources that produce actions, and then the bottom falls out on it, and it kind of seems like every action that I do that starts finally getting my life on track, somehow it's either short-lived or sabotaged or doomed or damned or something, because I can do good for 3 months, 6 months, or 2 years, and then bam, I'm back down again. That is the anxiety of resource insecurity. And then there's the last thing, which is I look around and I don't see any action I can undertake that would ever catch me up or clean me up or fix me up with what I need. That I could take 4 jobs. I could take 3 jobs a day, 8 hours a day, 24 hours a day, with my education level, with what they'll pay me, with this, and I will never get out of where I am. Boy, that's a grinding millstone of that sense of material resource insecurity. Now, it's all relative, right? I remember we were trying to build our church and get it set, and the building cost of our church back in the day, which, I do a lot of things differently now, $65,000 a month is what it would cost to pay our bills every month. Had $65,000 a month in building fees. That's before utilities of $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 a month. And then we had $150,000 in salary and benefits and blah, blah, blah. It was a lot to bring into the little church. And God just took, was just, the people gave. And I remember thinking, man, we need $400,000 this month and we're not going to make it. And then I talked to a guy who's building for his mega complex out in Texas. The note on it was $400,000 a month. And I thought, oh, wow, man, I need $400,000 a month. If I had that, it would take care of everything. And this guy's like, if I had $400,000 a month, I'd still have $1 million a month I don't have. It's all relevant, right? But there's also different kinds. Some people need a miracle for daily life sustenance, and other people need a miracle for the sustained operation of their situation. I'm not trying to say that everybody who needs some sort of breakthrough needs it equally or on the same kind. Now, if you've never experienced a need for like a survival miracle, then you might confuse that miracle with, well, man, we were really trying to get new windows for the house and we were able to get a credit card with 0 interest. Woo, God came through. Those are two different things, Connie and I these last few years have experienced just whatever. I don't really, but the debts and the loss and the collections and the threats and the shortfall and the shortfalling, it's been tough. But I've been worse before. I mean, we're not at the level of carrying a light bulb from room to room because it's the only one that works, right? We haven't gotten the electric put, we didn't get the water put in Kenobi's name, right? So I mean, we're doing okay with that. Are you Kenobi, tater salad Smith, right? We're not that. We're not splitting Wendy's napkins in half, right? For toilet paper. Like, well, you put this one over here and you put this one. And only use a half napkin. I've been there before. And when you've been in those places, it produces in you dreams for deliverance. Dreaming about a day when you won't be in that place anymore. This is the allure, right, of Moses. This is the allure of Moses saying to the children of Israel, don't go back to Egypt. Man, there's a place out here where you don't even have to build the house. It's already there. You don't have to furnish it. It's already there. Man, there's so much fruit. There's so much, man, it's the land that flows with milk and cookies over here. I mean, why are you going back? And you could see these formerly enslaved people saying, man, that's the greatest thing we've ever heard of in our life. Take us to this place. Why are you dreaming about houses and wells and vineyards? Why do you have those extravagant dreams? Because when you've dealt with years of resource insecurity, sometimes you swing from vine to vine of hope of how you make it through that next Wendy's napkin trip. The way you make it through is visions of a change and a deliverance one day. I think of Syria, right? And I'm closing here. Think of all the biblical stories, right, from the Hebrew scriptures. The prophet would show up. They'd all be, they'd be eating babies and slicing horses and up and eating their eyeballs, and we're just going to do it, and we're down to our last horse eyeball, and we're all going to die right now. And a prophet would show up and say, man, 1 week from today, all our brothers are going to be set free. All our money's going to be back. We're not going to be cut off from the world. We're going to be eating like kings. And they say, man, you're crazy. And sure enough, in the Hebrew scriptures, 1 week later, they're standing right there in the palace. It's the most amazing thing. And I think about Syria. I think about, I could just see a little prophet coming through and say, Allah has spoken, 10 days from today will no longer be this. Your mothers and daughters and brothers are coming out of the prison cells, and we're going to be done. And so people say, that'll never happen. And sure enough, 10 days later, they're like, wow, we did it. And I think that's what the Bible calls the turning of a captivity. Psalm 126, when the Lord turned our captivity, it seemed like a dream. Our mouth was filled with laughter and good sayings. Even the non-believers like, man, that's kind of crazy. That's the type of dreams of deliverance that we believe in. And guess what? I am a believer. I remain a believer. I remain a believer for favor to come to and through. I remain a believer that we can wake up in the world one day and say, how do we get out of it? And wake up in the world the next day and say, my God, look at what we've done. That's how you live. That's how I live. And in the middle of that, we learn through all these financial things, where we're stressed and where we're abundant, the seasons we have, the seasons we don't have, how we share a little bit, how we get assignments, how we get extravagant, how we dream of deliverance, how we dream of generosity, how we move through this world. There's still very much all of those rich elements. We're no longer in a weaponized, get on our side or you're going to go to the hot place religion, but we are still very much in a day-to-day walk with God, with the things of God, with the Spirit of God, with the flow of God. To carry, to possess, to steward, to release, whatever tangible forms, material or immaterial, of favor that has fallen to our jurisdiction. So I do believe in getting the message out. I do believe in generosity. I do believe in tenthing. But I'm trying with all my heart not to feel like the problems of today are where I fell short in the past, or the solution for tomorrow is where I'll get in vertical compliance. I'm just trying to walk through life seeing how I can carve out what has come to me and use it to bring some good somewhere, either as an assignment or an extravagant generosity or an act of compassion or of easing suffering or in response to somehow, some way, moving and taking the random favor that has befallen me. And even though I measure it differently by different times, I can see that I have good. And sometimes all I had, I don't have money, I don't have this. Man, I used to walk around with money. I'd find people on the street, take care of them, put them up here. Brother, where are you sleeping tonight? Man, I'll be right here. Well, what can I do to get you 5 nights just off the street, just to get some relief? Man, you do that for me? I mean, over and over. I don't have any of that. I have neither pot nor window. But man, when I see you sitting in the cold and I pull over and I say, brother, you all right? Man, my car broke down. I can't get this. I can't do that. Well, where do you live? Man, I live back here. Well, hop in. Can I get, man, you don't have to do it. Man, well, you're not going to stand out here. I say, what do you have? Normally, I'd have been able to get that guy's car towed, get this, pay that. I'd even been able to say, what kind of car are you driving? Well, that's an old one. Go down and see so-and-so, so-and-so, and see if they'll get you down. I got you. Don't worry about it. I mean, there was a time. But now where am I? Where I had a warm car with gas in it that ran. That was my place of abundance at that moment. And I ran into a person that could be a beneficiary of my abundance. This is, I think, where we are, trying to translate our religion, not into checking boxes to make sure we're blessed and not cursed, but in channeling our religious energy, going through life sensitive and aware that random favor comes and goes. We can't explain why, but human favor, we can be certain that it happens because it's going to happen through us. All right, that's all the time I got. I hope you got something out of that. It was a lot, but we're moving forward. No joke, seriously. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your love. Thank you for those of you who say, man, this is changing me. It's changing me radically. And I thank you for the radical kindness that you show Connie and I and our family. Man, this has changed my whole life. And just thank you for materializing your appreciation. It means more than I can say, but also more than that, even beyond that. I ain't supporting you. I don't care. I'll tune in every week and I'll get it. I ain't giving you nothing. You know, it's like, well, that's fine. You certainly can. But please purpose to live a life of generosity. All the daydreaming, all the largeness of spirit, all the recognizing favor, power, even in a sense of favor, impotence, to live this way. That's my goal as your pastor. That's my primary goal. When you say, where do you go to church? I go to the church of, where's that at? Well, it's based out of Atlanta, but it's really all over the globe. No way, can I go? Well, you can visit. I'll send you a link, see if you like the message. What I really want is you going through the world, generous of soul, because that's the best use of any true religion that we could ever have. And I think that's all we got for today. God bless you all. Peace, health, protection, preservation, abundance, aboveness, prosperity, favor, and Zoe. Ministry of angels, favor to us and through us. Light arising in the midst of darkness, loaded with benefit this day and every day. Divine direction, divine guidance, divine leadership. Peace on you all this Christmas week where there's sensitivity or suffering or separation or sorrow. I pray lifting and light, liberty and laughter would overtake it. Supplant and surround. Peace. May the road rise with you. This is my faith. In Jesus' name, amen. Make it great. Connie and I love you. The kids love you. Pop, we miss you, but we love you so much. And I'll see you next week. Boy, number 35, the final one of the year. Got some great thoughts to put to you, but you be blessed, and we'll see you soon. In Jesus' name.